Hey guys, and welcome to the Sports Tippers podcast. Today we're going to be talking about week 2 of the AFL finals. So tonight we've got Geelong hosting Sydney at the MCG. Current crown bet odds have Sydney at $1.35 and Geelong at $3.35. Obviously the odds are the way they are because of what Sydney did to Essendon last week in their final at the SCG, and we all saw how great Richmond were against Geelong, but also how bad Geelong were. Just they could not do anything and were completely shut down. So that's why obviously Geelong's the big outsider at $3.35. So we'll have a talk about some of the potential matchups and the plays that are going to be the dangers for both teams. Just give a quick rundown of the ins and outs. So Menzel's coming back in for Geelong, and Darcy Lang's also back in. Guthrie's out with a calf, and Jordan Murdoch's been dropped. So Menzel, not quite sure why he was dropped for the first game, considering he's their second leading goal scorer. And obviously we saw how much Geelong struggled to do anything last week at the MCG. So with him back in, obviously it shores up their forward line a bit more. And if Dangerfield does go to the forward line, that's a lot. Obviously, there's a few more options up there. The Swans are going in with no changes, so obviously they're still strong. So some of the matchups we saw, Franklin get a cork last week. They strapped him up and he's apparently supposed to be okay, but it is he's coming in obviously in hot form, but there always is a concern. The last few years, Franklin in the bigger games, has struggled with various injuries, and it looks like lack of interest sometimes. But for Sydney, with Ferguson playing unbelievable, he had a blinder last week, can very easily cover. So the concern, as I said, with Geelong is they're struggling to score at the moment. Their midfielders with Selwood back, he didn't look right last week. He hardly touched the ball. So there's always that thing people think, they're going to be better because he's back. But if he's underdone and he's 50%, he's going to take away from someone else who's healthy. So obviously he would have been better for the run last week, but we'll have to see how that one plays out. The Swans, you would assume, and we hope should be too strong in this. I don't think they're going to blow out Geelong. It all really depends. If Sydney, with their starts, the last few times they've played Geelong, they've absolutely belted them in the first quarter. I remember they played them in the prelim last year and jumped them early and were up by about 40. And when they played them this year down at Geelong, likewise, they got up by, I think it was about probably 30 to 40 in the first quarter as well. So if that happens, Geelong, I can't see them coming back, especially if being behind that much and how much they struggled to score. So yeah, the matchups wise, it's just going to be, obviously both have star-studded midfields, but you expect Sydney to come out on top there. Geelong do have a stronger back line, but if Franklin and Ferguson, they've got the two talls up there, if they can get going, and then there's Papley and Parker and that who can jump in the forward line, and Crum, they should be too strong. And then Gary Rowan on the MCG on the big ground, he's another guy who can pop up and kick quite a few goals. So we'll talk about some of the crown bet options that we've got in the player exotics and the head-to-head betting. So we'll do the individual player first. Josh Kennedy for the Swans, he's at 107.5. He should go over in this one. On the bigger ground, he loves playing on this ground. Last year in the grand final, he kicked 3 goals and had 35-odd possessions. As we all know, if you've been following him, he gets a lot of his points in tackles. So he shouldn't have any problem covering that. So that's the over 107.5, and it's $1.88 at the moment. Another one for Sydney who should go pretty well again is he's picked it up the last few weeks is Hanna Burry. He's at 98.5. We selected him last week and he went over. Again, very similar player to Kennedy. Very fit, can run. Tackle-wise as well, gets his share of tackles. So it's another guy at $1.88. He should be pretty comfortable at going overs as well. For Geelong, with Selwood struggling, it's a lot harder to pick. Obviously, Dangerfield's the one who pops to mind. He's at 117.5 at the moment at the $1.88. You still think he should cover that comfortably, especially if they put him up forward and he can pop up and kick 2 or 3 goals. So yeah, we do like that selection. And another Geelong one who is not too bad. Zack Tilley, he plays in their back line. He's the Irishman who does most of their kickings, and he's their ex-Carlton player. He's only at 82.5, so he's he should be able to cover that with his the possessions and the marks that he gets, especially with Geelong. They use him a lot to as their link-up player when going forward. So, yeah, Tui at the over 82.5 at $1.88 looks like a safe bet. The only one that looks of any value in the player head-to-head margins, player head-to-head one was probably Isaac Heaney at $1.88 against Jake Lloyd. I would have taken Lloyd originally if it was halfway through the season, but they aren't using him as much. He's another one similar to Tui where they use him in the back line. He's the guy who's kind of helps bail them out and helps them move out of the back line because he can with his fitness. But I think Heaney will get him tonight. Heaney's kind of taken over that role, and he gets a bit of a run in the midfield as well, and of course can pop up and kick a few goals like he did last week. So Heaney at the $1.88 looks like a pretty safe bet too. So yeah, guys, overall in this game, we all assume Sydney's going to win after the effort that Geelong put up last week. I don't think it's going to be as easy as what everybody thinks. I mean, we all want to see a good game. Unfortunately, last week, the majority of the games, apart from the Port Adelaide choke against West Coast, was the only close game, and all the rest of them were 30 plus point margins. So, a close game's always a better game. So we hope that Geelong can keep it close. But obviously, being a Sydney fan, I hope that Sydney get through and get to Adelaide in the prelim next week. So we will say Sydney by the 1-39 margin. That's currently at $2, and please follow the exotic bets that we've done for the players also. So the second game's on tomorrow night, and it's GWS hosting West Coast. So West Coast, after last week, they've got over Port Adelaide in extra time with the free kick. So that was Shuey after the siren. Personally, it was a free kick, but the umpires have been told to try and step out when someone grabs. I mean, you could see where Pollock touched him on the arm, and it was nowhere near a free kick. But obviously, when they lift their arm up and drop their shoulder, then obviously it becomes a free kick, and then obviously that's when the umpire has to pay it. But yeah, there's no player who wouldn't have tried to have gotten a free kick in that situation. So apart from diving straight into somebody to get a free kick, like anyone would have done it. So as much as I hate that it was given, it was a free kick. So with the odds in this game, GWS is $1.42 and West Coast are $2.95. GWS were pretty average against Adelaide in the first final last Thursday night it was. So the ins for GWS, we'll talk about those first. Taranto's in, and Steve Johnson, he's finally getting what could be his last game if they go down. Not quite sure why they didn't play him last week. They went with what I thought with De Boer as being the defensive stopper. He actually had a really good game. So he keeps his spot in the side. So with Johnson in the forward line, that actually gives them another attacking option with De Boer, who can play more of the negating role on like a Shannon Hearn or someone when they come out, or a Wellingham. So the outs for GWS, Jeremy Cameron, their most important forward, he's out with a hamstring for the rest of the season. And Mumford, in a big one, their ruckman, he's out with a foot injury. And for West Coast, Sharrod Wellingham comes back in, and Luke Partington's been dropped. So some of the key matchups that we'll have a talk about. Obviously, with Mumford going out, that's going to mean that Rory Lobb's probably going to have to play the majority of the time in the ruck. That's going to hurt GWS, obviously, in the forward line with one tall option gone and with Cameron not there. That basically puts the whole effort on Jonathan Patton, and he has been playing well, but he had a shocker last week, and he's probably going to have to go on McGovern, who's in turn he had an absolute blinder last week, and he's one of the best defenders in the comp. So I really think that's going to be a bit of a struggle with Lobb. Patton will have his turn; he'll do a bit of ruck as well. I'm assuming when it's only in the forward half of the field for GWS, but it does throw them out with Mumford out. For West Coast, they looked pretty good last week, even though they had the second, third quarters were really... I mean, it was a shutdown, slow-down game, but they really struggled after starting so well, but they've got all the experience. Priddis and Mitchell know that, like Johnson, if they lose, that they're done and it's their last game, so they're going to be pushing it really hard. I think the West Coast forward line's something that can trouble GWS. They've got Kennedy, LaCroix, Darling actually had a blinder last week, as he's capable of popping up every once in a while and doing something. It's going to be a struggle. I hope that this game isn't going to be shut down, slow, like GWS seem to like to play, even though I'm not quite sure why. When you've got a young team that can run and do what they can do, I'm not quite sure why they play the particular game style that they play. But yeah, it does work for them a touch. But as we saw last week, if they fall behind, they're not capable of coming back. I mean, they had their odd comeback where they came back against Richmond and they scraped home against Collingwood and stuff. But they seem like a team, if they get down by 20, that they just can't come back. There are a few teams that are like that, but if they have a bad start, like they did in Adelaide when they fell away in the second quarter, I think West Coast are a big chance in this game. We'll have a quick talk about the Crown Bet options for the exotics. So again, we'll start with the individual player lines. So we'll start with GWS first. Again, in this game, he was not too bad last week, but I think Callum Ward at 102.5, he should comfortably go over. Again, like Dylan Shield went missing last week against Adelaide. He had a complete shocker. They had a lot. They had a lot of guys who did. Cornelio actually had a really good game for GWS, which was long overdue. But Ward at the 102.5, like I've explained last week, they look for him all the time. He's one of the guys who actually gets in and has a go. He won't have I haven't seen him have a shocking game for probably since back to his Western Bulldogs days. So over the 102.5 looks like a good bet at the $1.88. Another GWS player who seems to look all right, and it could be his last game as well for them, is Kelly. He's at 110.5. There's a lot of speculation that he might be going to the Kangaroos for $1 million a season, so he should have a big game, and he needs to have a big game, more importantly, for them to do well. So Kelly at the over 110.5 looks good at $1.88. For West Coast, I usually go someone along the lines of an Andrew Gaff or someone, but someone who I think can have a bit of a stronger game, even though he's on pattern, is McGovern. His line's pretty low. It's only 77.5. He got intercept marked over intercept mark last week against Port Adelaide, and as we know, with 3 points for a mark, he'll get 10 to 15 marks. So the math says it's possible 45 points just in marks. And then obviously if he gets kicks and stuff and the odd tackles and stuff, pretty confident that he can cover the 77.5 at $1.88. And the other West Coast guy, I was expecting he was going to have a big game last week, and he did, kicking the game-winning goal, was Shuey. He has been injured on and off this year, and he's missed a few games, but he had an absolute blinder last week and got in the 150s, and his line's only still at 99.5 at $1.88. So he should comfortably, similar with the other players that we've mentioned, if he'll get his share of tackles and possessions, he's probably good. Another guy who you just automatically write down for 25 plus the possessions. So, and obviously if he pops on, kicks a few goals, the 99.5 shouldn't be enough. So the selection in this game, it's really tough one to call. I picked GWS at the start of the year, and everyone's a bit quiet on West Coast, but GWS, I'm not sure. I think West Coast are very capable of stealing this one. It's pretty juicy odds, as we said, at almost the $2.50 mark. So we'll take GWS at the 1 to 39. That's at $2.25 at the moment. But maybe have a look even at something with West Coast at the line, which is you can get 14.5 at the moment at the $1.88. This should be, I'm assuming it's not. Unfortunately, it's not going to be high scoring, and then you would assume that it's going to be one of those grind outs like what we saw in the Port Adelaide West Coast game. I don't know. I hope obviously from selecting GWS that they can get through to the prelim, but it's going to Toby Green, like. They're going to have to do something for GWS. They've had all the promise, but they just seem to struggle in the big games, and they've got all the younger guys who go missing. I'd love it if they came out and actually did what a Sydney does, even though the Sydney can play slow, but Sydney are more than capable. They can come out and put a 40-point first quarter on Geelong, and other teams as we've saw. It'd be great to see GWS come out and actually be aggressive and not play a slow down possession game and come out strong. If they do that, then obviously they'll go a long way towards winning. But likewise, what we saw with last week with West Coast against Port Adelaide, they were actually able to jump Port Adelaide, and obviously in the end, that's what probably got them across the line, even though Port Adelaide came back and got in front. So we'll take GWS just, but it's the biggest toss of the coin, obviously much more than the first game. So as I said, I made a post yesterday about with Richmond again. I never thought I'd be talking up Richmond, but like I said, at the $3.50, they're playing the winner out of the GWS West Coast game. Neither team can travel. West Coast, we all know how terrible they are once they go to Melbourne. GWS played Richmond this year. It wasn't that long ago. It was probably 2/3 of the round through the season, and Richmond the weather turned a bit average towards the end of the game, but Richmond had no trouble getting past them. I think they won by about 30 odd in the end. But yeah, the $3.50, they're Richmond, I'm pretty confident are going to take care of whoever wins this game. So you're basically getting Richmond at $3.50 in the grand final at the MCG at their home ground. We all saw against Geelong how well they play the MCG with their pressure, even though they don't have any of the big names. So, and this is coming from a Swans fan and big fan of Adelaide, but Sydney can obviously go into the hostile. We saw the crowd, the Richmond, if they make the grand final, it will be probably, they'll have 80,000 of the people will be their fans, obviously, and then with corporate tickets and stuff, the rest will make up of whoever they play. But hearing the home crowd advantage last week, Richmond, amazingly enough, like a Western Bulldogs, like I said, like last year, the draw's the thing that's worked out well for them, obviously. With Sydney having to go to Adelaide's side, they avoid, obviously, Sydney and Adelaide. If Sydney get through tonight, are the two best teams besides Richmond, so they can avoid them until the grand final, and they get them at their home ground. So have a think about it, guys, because the odds will change quick. Yeah, Richmond's going to start short against either of those teams. So thanks for listening. I hope please follow the Crown Bet odds. Please ask me and Beck if you have any questions. Remember, the odds do change pretty quick on the exotics. Try and get on as soon as you can if you are thinking of having a bet on it. And we'll be back next week to talk about the prelim finals, and we'll go from there. Okay, thank you.